Hey, this is Dave from Bay Stencil. We're going to paint a giraffe, and we're going to paint actually a 30-inch tall giraffe. What's unique about this process is that we're going to paint each layer not with just a single stencil, but with 3 stencils, and we're going to cut each of those 3 stencils independently. So in total, we're going to have 6 stencils to paint 2 layers of paint, a mid-tone and a dark layer of this giraffe. To start, we're going to need some materials, we're going to need some paint, and you'll need that Cricut Air Explorer 2 or a craft cutter or laser cutter of your choice. Let's start by picking our picture of a giraffe. Now I like to use Unsplash for pictures, and I like this one on the right, this blue one, because it allows me to have the neck and head. I might stencil this showing the head of the giraffe peeking out over a fence, for example. Now the next step, I'll upload the giraffe picture to Bay Stencil. Now I'm going to remove the background of this image, so I want to crop it so I just see the giraffe. I only want to see the head and neck of the giraffe. Don't need any of the green background or the blue background. Okay. That looks about right. Remove the background. And now we wait to get an email. That comes quick. And I see pretty quickly that I've got a 3-layer separation. I think it's that one in the top center that I like the best. And I'm going to choose to get the broken down version of that stencil. Click and wait for one more email from Bay Stencil. It should come pretty quick. And there it is. I can see a simulation of the painting. This would be what it would look like if I painted with a single panel stencil. But actually I want to go one step further. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click through on the link that says view it here, and I'm going to find the link to customize the digital download, which is there on the right in the blue panel, customize the download. And when I do that, I'm going to get a panel of 3 types of configuration for this thing. This is pretty simple and straightforward once you know what you're looking at. First is our final image height. I want to paint an image of this giraffe that's 30 inches high. Okay, so when I do that, I see that I'm actually looking at 6 panels, but I think I can do better than that because my Cricut actually handles 12 by 20. So I'm going to change this to 12 inches by 20 inches, and I'm going to leave the ½ inch margin intact, and I'm going to ask Bay Stencil to produce, there we go, 3 panels, 3 panels tall by 1 panel wide. You see the panels are turned on their sides. And then I could choose to go without bridges here, but maybe better to use the stable bridge option and to keep the bridges at about 0.05 inches, about a 1/16 of an inch thick. And once we review and make sure everything looks right, that's good. Almost 17 inches wide by 30 inches high, which will look good on my canvas. And I'm going to go ahead and buy the digital download. Once I've paid here, this should also come quick. It should come really quickly as an email, and it should have a zip file attached to it. And inside the zip file, you need to open that up. I'll find a bunch of SVGs in a directory called Custom. Okay, so there's my Custom folder, and I see that there's actually 9 files there, 9 SVGs. Let's think about that for a second. If there are 3 color layers and 3 panels per layer, that's 3 times 3, that's 9 SVGs. That's right. So when I open up my cutter program, which in my case is Cricut Design Space, I'm going to upload those files to the Design Space, and actually I'm only going to need 6 of them. The reason is that I don't need the white layers because I'm going to paint this stencil on white. So I'm just going to get layers 2 and 3, which are the mid-tone and dark layers. You might want a different stencil. You might want to reproduce this on a dark pattern, in which case you might want layers 1 and 2. But I want layers 2 and 3, so those are the ones I'm uploading to Design Space. And once I have them all in Design Space, I'm going to add them to a single new project. Okay, and once I've got the files in the project canvas here, I'm gonna do myself a little bit of favor and sanity check and put all of these different panels together so I can see how the layers put together. I don't want to miss any of these layers, and I also want to make sure that they're all sized exactly the same. I don't want to resize one of them without resizing the others. Now, if I've been honest and told Bay Stencil how large a stencil I want, I shouldn't have to resize them at all, because Cricut understands the dimensions of inches that I've put on these files. Okay, so we have the mid-tone layer on the left and the dark layer on the right, each consisting of 3 separate panels that are in landscape mode. Now, I've decided here to remove the labels from these things because I don't want the Cricut to cut those very small numbers and letters that are on the left and the right hand side. So I'm going to remove them. In order to do that, I need to take each stencil panel, ungroup it, and remove those text labels. That's not so hard to do. Notice that I'm going to leave some registration marks. I'm going to leave those in place. I'm only going to remove the text labels. You can either hide them or remove them, and I'm choosing to remove them. Then for each panel group, I'm going to attach those layers so that they don't get broken up into multiple shapes. Let me position each of these cut layers into the center of the cutting mat, so that when I'm finally done, my stencil will be in the center and I won't have any overspray across the edges. Now I've done it for the first, do it quickly for the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth panels, and then I'm ready to cut, right? Except for my Cricut Air Explorer 2, I actually ran into a problem. The Bluetooth stopped working, which may sometimes happen to you, but in my case I was able to find a USB adapter and connect my Mac to the Cricut Air Explorer 2, and I had my backup working, and I was back online very quickly. I choose to cut with maximum force, and I want to do 2 passes with this because otherwise I found that I don't cut out every layer completely. And even with maximum force, I find that it helps to choose to go with even a little bit more pressure, and I'm off to the races. While we're waiting for the Cricut to chew through all 6 of these panels, I'll show you a quick little trip for cleaning up your cutting mat. I like to use a Teflon spatula with a flat edge on the bottom. This one's not quite flat enough, so I had a little problem with it, but a Teflon spatula with a flat edge makes short work of cleaning up your cutting mats when you're done cutting each layer. With all my panels cut out, I'm going to lay all my panels out, and I'm going to line them up end to end, and I'm going to punch out these little tiny triangular registration holes. You're going to see what we use these for. We use them to make sure that each stencil panel gets aligned properly with the stencil panels under or over it. The way we're going to use these is when we put the stencil panel onto our surface, we're actually going to mark the surface through that little hole so that we can line up the next stencil panel over that same hole. And of course you're going to use 2 holes at a time so that you make sure your stencil has the right orientation and it's not sloping off to one side or the other. Let's lay out the mid-tone layer and you'll see what I mean. If we put the top of the head first up so that the top of the head is close to the top of our canvas, then we lay down the next layer. You see how the physical stencils actually overlap, those panels overlap. And then finally the bottom of the neck is going to come down almost to the bottom of our canvas. And when I do that, I see, okay, everything's placed right. And now I need to mark where the holes are in those registration holes in the stencil panels. There we go, the right one, and I'm also going to mark the left one at the same time while the stencil's flat on the surface. Make sure those holes are nice and clean. Looks like I didn't get the little triangles punched all the way out there. It might help to have bigger triangles when you do this. So maybe we'll change these to make it so that you have bigger registration marks. That sounds like a good idea. Okay, now here's the second panel, and it fits over the holes, the marks from the first panel, and also then we mark the holes on the bottom of the second panel so that we'll see where the third panel should start. Okay, so then we take this one off. Oops, that wasn't quite clean enough. The hole wasn't quite clean enough. Okay, so we take the second panel off, and then we're going to match up and put the third panel down and make sure that that's going to fit. So for 3 panels, we end up with 4 marks, 2 on each side. It probably goes without saying that we want to use the same registration marks to cut both layers, the mid-tone and the dark. But enough talk about cutting, let's look at the painting. I'm going to paint this stencil 2 times, once in brown and black and a second time in pink and red. The first time I'm going to really use those registration marks, and I'm going to show you in real time how it takes some effort to line up the stencil on the registration marks and to assure that it stays aligned while you paint. I recommend using some quilt basting spray to hold the stencil to the surface while you do this, because otherwise the stencil might slide around, and I really don't want you to screw up your stencil by having it slide around on you. But anyway, I have done this a lot, and I can usually hold the stencil with one hand while I paint it with the other hand and keep it pretty much in the same place. Here comes the light brown layer. And see, I'll hold it while I move my hand just a little bit so that I get that other ear down. Great. And once this layer is painted, it's going to be, the trick is going to be to register the second panel. Once the first panel is painted, the trick is to register the second panel over the first so it's seamless between the first panel and the second panel. Let's see how this works. I want to make sure that black dot is right inside that triangular hole on the right. Is it? Yeah, it's getting close. Okay, this is the tricky part because these holes are small. They're probably too small. And then the dot is also in the right place on the left. So once I have that in the right place, I'm going to pick up the paint can. I'm going to go to town because I wanted to get this done quick before anything moves around on me. Looks like it already moved around. So I'm looking for that right hole to match up with the left hole. There we go. Now get that on the left side and then pivot the hand over a little bit so that the stencil is flush against the panel. And there we go. The first 2 layers successfully lined up together. Let's do the rest of it. Let's do the third panel of 3. And I've got a neck of a giraffe and a mid-tone layer that's complete at 30 inches high. Looking good so far. Now when we do the dark layer, we're going to use, as we said before, we're going to use the same registration marks that we used for the mid-tone layer, and we're going to line everything up just the same, looking for those black dots inside those triangular registration marks. It looks like I have found some very dark green paint instead of black paint. Let's hope that this looks pretty good. There we go. There's our first dark layer, and I've got the eyes lined up right, and the darks of the ears are looking right. So this is lined up correctly. Notice that there's a little couple of holes there for the nostrils, the top of the nostrils. I'm going to want to make sure that the lower parts of the nostrils are matching up just perfectly so that I have a seamless top to bottom. And it looks like I did a pretty good job. The third panel is easy and not so critical if I screw that up, but I'm still going to line it up just the same to try to get as close as I can. And there we go. I'm pretty happy with that result, as you can tell. Okay, so now we're going to paint the same stencil, this time in pink and red. And in order to show you what might happen if you didn't use the registration marks, I'm going to do this one completely freehand. So I'm not going to use the registration marks and the registration holes at all. I'm just going to eyeball it. Like when I eyeball it, I actually have to line up each of the panels one after the other, looking at where the panels meet up. And where the panels meet up is basically a series of lines where the little edges of the nose there meet from the top meet the bottom, and I have to kind of eyeball it to see where it should go. So I start by putting the stencil a little bit above and then wiggling it down to see where they go. This kind of depends on there being a shape that is the same on both sides, or that connects both sides of the stencil. You can't do this if you just have a bunch of random dots that don't cross the panel boundaries. So I was a little lucky that I could do that here, but you're going to see that maybe the result isn't quite as good as I had it with the other. When I was using the registration marks here, when I go to the second layer, I sort of have to eyeball where the second layer goes over the first layer, but since I've already seen it work once, I had the experience to know that basically those eyes are supposed to go where the eyes are, and the darkest part of the ears are where the darkest part of the ears are. Blow it off to kind of keep it dry enough to lay the stencil over it. And this was also kind of hard to see where the red nostrils are going to come down and meet the other red nostrils, and maybe I could have done that a little bit better, a little bit cleaner. And by the time I'm done, I think, ooh, red looks weird, so let's put a little bit black over where the eyes are, and that makes this look more like a happy giraffe. Now this is okay, except look closely. You see that bottom part of the neck? It's not quite clean, and the nostrils were better, but on the bottom part of the neck definitely was a place where you could see, oh, this guy's used 2 or 3 panels here. The original giraffe that I used the registration marks on looks much cleaner, and I'm much happier with the result. I think you will be too. I recommend using the registration marks whenever you use more than one panel in a single stencil layer. So there you have it. I bet you never thought you could paint a 30-inch stencil that you cut on your Cricut, but there it is. Let's recap. First, choose your image and upload it to Bay Stencil. Second, stencilize it, keeping in mind the height and width the final image should be. Third, upload to your cutting program, which in my case was Cricut Design Space. Fourth, cut out all of your stencil panels with their registration marks. Fifth, register your panels on the surface where you'll be painting. Then, have fun painting. I hope you enjoyed making this oversized multi-panel stencil of a giraffe and painting it with us. I know we did. This is Dave signing off from Bay Stencil.